Thank you for listening to this month's episode of Mental. Today, I have a very special guest. I say special for the sense that we haven't even met each other in person, but nonetheless, we have Jim joining us this month for this episode of Mental. Real quick, before I let Jim introduce himself, someone that's played at the MLS level. He was drafted by the Whitecaps. Before the Whitecaps, he went to Notre Dame. He is a Colorado native. Proud to have a Colorado native on this podcast. Fast forward in his career, he found himself going to Norway. If you know the likes of the captain of Arsenal these days, Odegaard, yes, he played with him. He also has a mentor, Jesse Marsh, the coach of Canada's national team right now. And kind of uniquely and ironically, his big push started his pro career, started with an injury, and unfortunately it ended with an injury. So that was things in a nutshell. But Jeff, can you give us a little bit more of the background for you and our guest in this mental podcast?
Yeah, of course. Well, Nick, thanks so much for having me. And I think it's amazing what you're doing. So I'm happy to be here and share all just sort of my stories and hopefully that, your players and families that are listening will take something out of it. But yeah, so my name's Jeb Brofsky. I grew up right over by Columbine High School in Littleton, Colorado, and played for the Colorado Rush growing up through the 90s and early 2000s, and then was fortunate enough to go on to Notre Dame. After Notre Dame, had a pro career in MLS with the Whitecaps, New York City FC, Montreal Impact, and Minnesota United. And as you alluded to, the year in Norway with the young 15-year-old Martin Odegaard was a special time. But yeah, this journey has been, it's just that. It's been a real journey, a lot of ups and downs. And, I think from my career and from my struggles, I think coaching and doing mindset coaching with players, I can hopefully, help them learn from things that have happened in my career and I've seen happen in others' career that are just sort of realities of the game and realities of life. And, the stronger mindset you have about things, which, I probably didn't have the strongest mindset until I was done with my career. And looking back, wish I could have had some of these tools at my disposal, but now, this is my life passion, is helping players and families and just people look at their experience in soccer as one to gain from, no matter what happens, and hopefully keep the love of the game going. So that's a little bit about my background.
Fair enough. Well, and speaking of love of the game, word of the day, injuries. It's hard to keep that love of the game when you have injuries. And it's, I think, such an isolating event for so many people, right? They feel alone. I'm not a part of the team dynamic really anymore. I came there with my friends, whether you're at the female level or the male level, right? So if we speak to the word of the day a little bit, Jeff, with injuries, and we can kind of steer wherever you want to steer it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, injuries, sort of the name of the game in my career, that's for sure. But when I was young, I think when I was around 11, 12, I was really feeling like I was I was growing, I was peaking, I was on the best team in, Colorado. I was on the ODP team. And I'm like, wow, okay, there's an upward trajectory here. And we were playing in a kind of a meaningless rush open game at Fort Logan. And we were 13 years old. And the month after this tournament, we had regionals, we had nationals, we had, all the big things that we were all looking forward to. And whatever it was that day, we were playing a team, we were up 6-0, I think, and this day's replayed in my head, day in and day out. I let my frustrations get the best of me. And this kid was kind of kicking me. So finally I was like, okay, well, I'm going to kind of kick him back. Next time he got the ball, I tried to absolutely go through him and the ball. And my tibia shin bone just snapped right in half. And immediately I kind of knew, oh, that was bad. And so that summer I missed out on, the nationals. I missed out on ODP, everything. And I was in a cast up to my, groin, basically, that kept my legs straight. So I was out for quite a number of months. And then the day I got back from injury, which again, like we can probably dive into that injury time, but I basically broke it again the first day I came back in training. A ball hit me weird, and a guy tackled me, but my calcium deposit had broken off. So there was another, 6 to 8 weeks of rest and being on my butt. So That time, I will say, and looking back on my entire career, if I had not broken my leg at 13, which was the most difficult time, like in my, I guess, youth career, I would never have made it to be a pro. I think what that process taught me, and for anyone listening, like I'm sure there's some resonance here, but 13 to 16, I didn't play 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes on my club team for those 3 years. It was just waking up at 6 a.m., working by myself, and then going to training after school. Hey, coach, what can I do to get in that starting 11 or get more minutes? And this impacted my coaching career down the road, which I hadn't known at the time. But what my coach at the time had said was, keep working hard, Jeb, keep working hard. And I personally think that's one of the worst things you can tell a player is, just keep working hard and put your head down. And I don't think that's a solution to those issues that pop up with players who really have a desire to grow. But those 3 years, I learned a lot about injuries. I learned a lot about myself. And then from then on, I was 16 years old and I had a coach that, he's just a local guy from Denver. And he just saw me and said, I believe in you. And from 16 to 17 years old, I got recruited to go to Notre Dame. And within a year and a half, one person kind of looking at me and saying, I believe in you, really changed the course of my life. And so, through Notre Dame, the podcast isn't long enough to go through all my broken bones, but broken every bone in my feet, every toe, shin bones, femur, tore up my knees, and then, rib cage, collarbone, concussions, those things have all kind of come my way through the sport, which, it was always ironic because I was told when I was young, and most players, we're all worried about getting injured. We all, especially if it's our first injury, we don't want that to happen because I think there's a fear of how we're going to handle it mentally. Sitting on the sidelines, watching your healthy teammates play, it's very hard to kind of see the positives or just see what's the opportunity here for me. And when I try to focus on players, because I didn't handle my broken leg well mentally, that was an injury that took me about 4 years, 5 years to get over. And if I had the tools that I know now, that might have been, as soon as I step back on the field, I'm even stronger mentally than when I got injured. So through my career, it kind of set me up to, you know, I was the guy who didn't really listen to his body. I thought my body was my kind of machine and my tool to use, which I considered mental toughness. But that's just kind of putting things behind the curtain, and you're going to have to face them later. So, fast forward to the end of my career playing in Minnesota United, I was in the last game of the season, new contract year coming up the next year, and just made a simple cut to defend a guy, and my whole left knee just completely exploded. Like, it just blew up. So I tore everything in my knee, went into surgery the next day. Surgery went well, went to PT. And then that night I told the PT when I was there, like, there's a pain in my calf that I just can't explain. It's really deep. And he said, well, just keep an eye on that. That could be a blood clot, but probably not at your age and your health level and all those things. So fast forward to that night, I'm sleeping on the couch with a machine pumping my leg, really trying to psych myself up about my mentally attacking my injury and getting healthy as soon as I could. And that night I woke up at 2 a.m. with the most pain in my rib cage, couldn't breathe, couldn't talk, the worst pain I've ever had. And texted my doctor, the team doctor. I said, hey, I think I'm dying. I think this is it. What is this? And he said, I'm sending an ambulance to your house. That's a blood clot. So what had happened was a blood clot from surgery broke off, went through my heart, went through my lungs, and killed a fourth of my lung overnight. And so all the pain I was feeling was all the nerve endings of the pulmonary embolism happening within my body. And from that ended up being my career ending injury, which even at that time, I felt like I could still maybe get back and, push things a little bit, but it was a real sort of like year-long process, especially being a dad at that time as well, like a new dad. It was almost like soccer went on without me. The world kind of moved on without me. I was, stuck figuring out how to feed a family of four and get to work. And, so that's when I started coaching, and just sort of an opportunity I never saw out of that whole situation. And to this day, I'm grateful that I jumped into coaching. So, that's a lot of background there, but yeah, I would say, injuries right now, the players I work with, players I talk with, that's one of their greatest fears. And the fear of the unknown, the fear of what, almost how strong I am, like how strong can I be through this? Will I be the same player? Will my identity be stripped? All these voices sort of come in our head. But the ironic thing is that injuries actually make you better. They can make you stronger. They can propel you almost as a test. And I see every injury I ever had as a, kind of a soul test. It's like, okay, well, how bad do you want it? Like, how bad do you really, you say you want to go to that level, you say you want this. And injuries, if we look at it, are just a one part of the game. They're big thing to the individual who is injured, but framing your injury and your time spent healing yourself and listening to your body is so important to the longevity of your career, the success of your career, and also your self-confidence in yourself. I think a lot of players get injured unexpectedly. Obviously, we're not planning to get injured. No one plans it, but things happen, especially when you go up to the higher levels. Game gets faster, guys get stronger, tackles get harder, stakes get higher. The oxygen kind of is removed from the environment and you're in survival mode. So, I'd say the beautiful thing in my life was injuries. Not that I wanted them, not that I cared to have them, but I learned the most from those moments in my life. That's for sure.
Couple things stuck with me. One, you said probably the worst advice coaches can give somebody is keep working hard. And you were really told that as you're rehabbing between that 13 and 16-year-old age.
Mhm.
Why do you feel like that's bad advice? If so many coaches give that advice. And then
Mhm.
two, what advice would be better in your opinion, especially knowing what you know?
Yeah, well, I think what when I was 13 to 16, and most players when they're feeling like they're working their butts off and they're going out by themselves, they're doing everything they can. When you get that answer, it's not tangible. It's not something you can like take home with you and go, okay, what does that mean? Like what specifically is that telling me to do? And what I challenge coaches to do is be more tangible, be more specific, give them something, even one thing that like a kid, first of all, if a player is asking, that means they care. Usually, it's not the parents telling the kid to go ask and things like that. Hopefully it's not because, you want the kid driving their own development. But it's like a kid, like an Oliver Twist asking for more gruel in his bowl and in her bowl and saying, can I have some more? And what you give them is a generic, just keep working hard. And I felt personally that that's a very, debilitating, a little bit like it held me back because it almost confused me. It was like, well, I don't know, like, should I not sleep? Like, is that what that means? Like, do I take it to the ultimate extreme and just, show you I'm running 26 miles a day? Like, I don't know. What does that mean? So I really urge coaches and I urge myself, like if a kid and a player wants more, if if you're able to give them more, like meaning specifics or details and things like that, be honest. And that honest feedback, I think, really goes a long way. But if you don't know, revert refer them to somebody who does, like so I think it's just an open hand for the kid asking, please give me more. I need more. And it's not that they need more to impress you. I think players are asking that because they want to find out what's really in them. Like they're honest and they want to say like, okay, if I work on this, will I get better? And then on the end of that, I think coaches have a big responsibility when a player does come to you, they ask you for that feedback, you give them a challenge, you give them one or two things that I want you to really focus on. When the coach sees that behavior come out of them or that action, they need to be rewarded for that. That they need to see some tangible like, hey, I see you, you did it, well done. And like maybe it's more minutes, maybe it's a bigger role in a game, whatever it is. But I think players need more of those challenges. And then when they do achieve that challenge, they're seen, and that I think that keeps that motivation wheel, turning and turning.
That makes sense. How about if you knew what you know now when it comes to listening to your body, can you elaborate on that? Because if you wanted kids are told that, hey, just listen to your body. You know it best. What does that mean to you now, having gone through numerous different types of injuries? Some of them, like you alluded to, like broke your leg, came back, broke it your first day. You're
Yeah. Yeah, that destroyed me, just even mentally because I didn't have mindset coaches. There wasn't this era of like mental health was really being discussed. And I had, the way I handled it was, a lot of nights I'd cry myself to sleep. I would be in my room alone, just thinking about like what a future I wanted, but how far away that seems now because of this injury. So, a lot of walls start to close in mentally for that definitely did for me and for players, I can see it. And that's where that fear stems from is, that feeling of being isolated, being alone, being left behind, I think is the big fear, especially when you're sitting on the sidelines and you see, one of your teammates just absolutely crushing it at your position. You're going, well, man, now the hill just got even higher. So when I come back, I don't have my spot. I need to re-earn it. And so when I look back on my injuries and my life, really, I didn't start taking care of my body or like, let's say, putting attention on my body in the healing sense and until I was injured. So like when injuries would come, then I'd be taking care of my body. Then I'd be thinking about everything I'm putting in my body. And I started to realize that, especially after my career ended and, I wasn't using my body for performance. I wasn't using my body as a machine anymore. I really had a distant relationship with exercise for a while because I always saw exercise as like a means to an end, something that like if I take care of my body, it'll take care of me in battle. And then, if it gets hurt, it's just going to have to deal with that. Well, over the course of 30 plus years of doing that, my nervous system was like, no, like it's like your body starts to fight back and it starts to go, wait a second, I've done everything you've told me to do, but you're not going to treat me this way anymore. And rightfully so. So when I got out of my career, I heard the term self-care, I think for the first time. And I, it could have been Mandarin. Like I didn't understand what self-care was. I thought that was something that like you do when you're, like a not extreme athlete and that you just take care of yourself and you be nice to yourself. And it was such a foreign concept to me that I look back and I go, oh, that's actually exactly what I needed my whole life. I needed to learn that skill of taking care of my body, myself, my mind, my emotions. Those things needed to be daily habits for myself. And that's where I think when players who are doing self-care routines, like, it could be I'm doing breath work for 2 minutes a day. I'm going to read something I want to read. Like that's self-care because you're just putting conscious attention on yourself. Most of us players, when we're growing up, we're people pleasers, we're perfectionists. We want everybody to love what we're putting out as our performance. And then we'll take care of ourselves after, like, okay, I got that. They gave me good feedback. All right, now I'll go home and I can take care of myself, maybe. And that's something that was completely backwards in my life. And now, certainly out of my career, I've put routines in place and I can tell you when you're doing those things daily, when you're injured, it's just another daily habit that you're like, I always take care of me. I like the swings, the roller coaster of down and up swings of confidence, like those start to go away simply by putting attention on yourself and daily focus on if I feel my best, I'm going to be able to give my best. And my thinking as most perfectionists, growing up, we think if I get this, then I'll feel great. And flipping that script around is super, super powerful. And I wish I had, kind of learned that at a young age.
that's big time. That's big time. Well, let's get out of some of the injury. We shift into kind of some stories, if you will, in this segment. So can you share with our audience that that's playing with Odegaard? What was that about? So can you explain how we even got to that point and then what it was like? Because again, so many kids listening to this watched tonight. Granted, he's injured, right? But they watched him on the weekend. He's quality.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, my career, I was very fortunate, even shocked sometimes of the locker rooms I found myself in and the people that were the players I was playing next to, the guys I was lining up with, World Cup winners, Champions League winners. I'm sitting on a bus with Pirlo, Lampard, and Villa behind me, and my buddies and I, American guys, we're talking about Big East finals against UConn in Stores, Connecticut. And a row behind us, they're talking about missing a penalty in a Champions League final in it. And we're like, yeah, but have you ever played in Connecticut? Like, so there was a different world. And when I found myself in these locker rooms, like I've always been just a lifetime learner, and I have to ask questions. I have to like absorb. So I annoyed these guys, they're like, who is this, young American guy? And I would ask questions, and that's how I just learned and learned. My education really came from like 22 to 30, where I was really learning the details of the game. And when I was in Norway, I had showed up. The team that I was on, Strømsgodset, was a local team just outside of Oslo. They had just won the top league the previous year. So when I was on loan there, the coach, who was a Danish guy, fiery guy, loved him. He had kind of, the day I got there, he said, look, here's the kind of layout. We got a lot of young guys. We've even got some like young superstars that are up and coming. Just play a role here and be a leader, things like that. So, going in eyes wide open, I was like, okay, what's this team going to be about? And sure enough, there was this 15-year-old, small, kind of dainty kid that everyone before the first practice, they're like, yeah, that's Martin. I go, okay, well, like he's 15, right? And they're like, yeah, no, like Real Madrid, Man United, everyone's looking at this kid. I go, that's big time. Like I, I'm watching, or after they said that, I'm watching his mom dropped him off at training, in his little Subaru or whatever car it was. And I got in the locker room, and, Martin's already out in the field. He's already hitting these like, balls against this rebounder and like juggling and then hitting it back. We all come out to training, and I go, well, I already like the kid's attitude. Like he's got something. And then we started playing, and I go, this is not a normal 15-year-old. Like we're pinging balls. Like I think I pinged a ball into his knees. Like it was a horrible ball, but I drilled it into him, took it down smoothly with his left, turned the guy, played out. I go, he's special. And sure enough, that next year, he's making 80 plus $1,000 a week playing for Real Madrid, and following his career and just, staying connected with him is this is one of his big first injuries, I think, in his career that happened only a couple weeks ago. And I know him, like, especially he's got support around him. He's got good family structure around him, like people who really support him. But I know internally, being at Arsenal, having the Tottenham game that next week, missing the Man City game, like there's pain going on inside him. There's fear of missing out. Like, not that he's going to lose his spot being a captain or being who he is, but those fears are the same as the 12-year-old here playing in, Littleton, Colorado. Right. So his mental strength, just being a young kid doing the career he did, he's obviously got the tools to handle it. But yeah, I was, again, very fortunate to learn a lot from these guys.
And speaking of learning, you told me before we started this podcast, Jesse Marsh has been someone that you leaned into and leaned on in some tough moments. Can you share with our audience a little bit about what is he like as a person? Because we just see so many of these individuals that are privileged to play with and play for. What makes him so special in your eyes? Like from
Yeah, well, Jesse, from the day I met him, and he had called me, I think on Thanksgiving when I was home with family in the off season that year, and never talked to him, never, I didn't even know he knew I existed. He gave me a call on Thanksgiving, said, happy Thanksgiving. How are you doing with your family? And I go, is this Jesse Marsh, or is someone, messing with me? And, he said, I've traded for you to Montreal Impact. I can't wait to have you. And, he was also at that time going to make me, I was never a right back or a left back in my whole career. But that year in Vancouver, we had a game against Manchester City. It was an international friendly. And speaking of injuries, our right back on Friday, the day before the game, got injured. And so the coach came up to me on the way out from training and said, hey, Brovsky, you're going to play right back tomorrow. And I'll tell you, I know the first feeling that popped up was, oh my God. Okay. So wait, but we're playing against, these guys. And never play this position. That's what's going on in my head, but out of my mouth, yes, sir, no problem. So I go home and kind of freak out and ended up playing well the next day against City. And that was my position the rest of my career. I played right and left back. And so I met Jesse and the first time I met him, we sat down and first of all, what struck me about Jesse, and especially in this business, when you're at that level, you can usually see if an ego is talking to you or a human being. And it was right off the bat that this guy cared about you as a human being. He cared about your family. He cared about, your life, what else you're interested in. But it wasn't just ticking boxes for him. He remembered these things. He would bring them back up, in the future. And then, when I was in New York, I wasn't playing for Jess anymore. I had just kind of told him I want to stay in touch. And so from 2012 to now, just kind of here and there where he's just been a big mentor to me, especially coaching and life. But I get a call from my dad in 2000 because Jesse Marsh owns, I think he's a part owner of some restaurants here in Denver. And he was in Denver. I was in New York. And my dad calls me and says, "You won't believe who showed up to the house today." I said, "What?" So Jesse Marsh was visiting somebody in the area. He came up to my parents' house and just said, "Hey, it was a pleasure coaching your son and just want to say hello." And I go, okay, how many guys in this business, especially at that level, especially what he's been able to achieve as an American coach? I think he's a trailblazer. I think he's really put American coaches on the map in a lot of ways, but the class and the human nature of him, he cared more about you as a human than he did as a player. And that's something I'll always respect, about him and any other coach who does that.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a
That is
special
different.
guy.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, let's somehow segue into a question from our audience.